What does Christianity look like in Guatemala? To help me answer this question, I am really excited to welcome to the show Jon Williams, and I'll tell you how I got to meet him. He's a friend of a friend, and we'll share about that story in just a little bit. But Jon, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Looking forward to it.
Oh, absolutely. Before we continue on with the conversation, if you could like this video, subscribe to the channel or the podcast, let your friends know about it, that would be wonderful. And that would bless the ministry of ARC. But all right, Jon, we're going to get to Guatemala in just a moment. But tell us a little bit about your background, your story leading up to now.
Okay. So man, that's a long story right there.
You can tell whatever version of the story that you feel
Okay.
like sharing.
All right. Sounds good. So several years ago, I think I was about 17, something like that. Went on a mission trip to Ecuador. And so I really felt like God was calling me to do missions then, and then it just kind of kept on going on. The next year I ended up going to Guatemala and Ecuador. And the year after that I went to just Guatemala. And at that point, I just felt God was calling me to do missions. And so it's kind of a long story and interesting of how everything fit together. And that's a really, really long story of how that happened. But I moved, it was in 2019, and that was after probably about 4 or 5 years of just doing short-term missions. It was about maybe month or 2 months that I would go. And so, yeah, that's how it got started. That's how I ended up moving 2019. The first mission trip I actually went on was my Spanish teacher. He had his own personal like ministry of doing missions in Ecuador. And that one really opened my eyes up to, okay, I want to serve and do this. Because we went and we did a lot of evangelizing and stuff like that. A lot of door to door stuff with that mission trip. But I remember I instantly fell in love with it then. A lot different from what I'm doing now. There's evangelizing and there's a mixture of like just serving people in general with that. But that trip really kind of set things in motion for doing missions later on. If it had not been for him, I wouldn't have been here. So,
I love it. Now, growing up, I guess you may have had thoughts when I grow up, I'll do this or I'll do
mhm,
that. What were you thinking you were going to do as maybe a teenager in
mhm.
mission work? Any ideas?
Oh yeah, I wanted to play football bad. That was the only thing in my mind. When I was in high school, grades were okay. Like I wasn't bad. I was doing pretty good. Most of them A's and B's. But everything on my mind was just football, 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 football. Um, and then I ended up blowing out my knee completely, had 5 knee surgeries. But even then, I wasn't even that great, but I was going to go play at a NAIA school. And I went there for their spring game. I was like, this is not what God's want me to do. And so I'd already been to Guatemala and Ecuador at that point. I was like, yeah, God, this is not what he wants from me. And so, but yeah, beforehand it was just, yeah, I'm going to do something with football or coaching or something like that.
Real quick, do you have a favorite NFL team or college football team?
So I'm very weird about that in the fact that I hate watching football. When I played football, I loved it, but I cannot stand watching it for 1 second. I don't have a favorite team. I was raised a Mississippi State fan and a Dallas Cowboys fan, but never actually enjoyed watching it. I only liked playing it.
You know what? Let me tell you. So I'm in Alabama, and
Mm,
probably much happier for that fact. Just playing football as opposed to watching it because I know there's a lot of heartbreak there.
yeah.
You at some point come home, you tell your family, "Hey, I think God's calling me not only to just do short-term missions trips
Hmm.
full time.
Hmm.
Vocational mission work is one way."
Hmm.
What was that conversation like with your family?
That one, it honestly wasn't too like rough or anything like that because my parents had actually told me we thought you were going to do that. Um, I had for some time I knew that God was calling me to do full time. I'd been working at just a desk job at a gym, like at the local gym, and I remember my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, had called me, and she worked for an organization here. And she said, "Hey, the president of this organization said that he wants to talk with you about moving full time to Guatemala." And I remember for a long time, I had just prayed. I was like, "Okay, God, I know you've called me to do this. When's it going to happen?" I had come back from it was crazy how it all had happened. I'd come back from a short term mission trip that year. And I remember the place I was working at, I was going to get a better pay, better salary. And they were like, but you're going to have to be more full time and stuff. I was doing university online at the time. And so I was just doing part time. Um, and I was like, well, I'm not sure if I want to do that. And he was like, well, you'd be making a lot more money doing this. He was like, what would stop you from doing that? I was like, well, I feel like God's called me to missions. He said, well, then don't worry about this job. You'll be fine. He said, if God's called you to do that, however it works out, it's going to work out. I remember even at the time, I had like a friend and a family member. They were like, "Yeah, why are you not going ahead and taking that job?" And I was just like, I just don't feel like that's what's God lead that's what God is leading me to do." I remember that day she called me. I just broke down and cried. And I was like, "Oh my goodness, here it comes!" And so it was funny because after I looked at my phone after a few minutes in the conversation with her, I'd gotten a phone call from the guy. I was like, I've got to let you go because he just called. And so I called him and he said, "Hey, John, raise your support and come on down to Guatemala and we have something for you to do." And so the this never happens normally, but he told me to raise the support and he was expecting by next year. And I had one person that sent me enough to support me for, I think it was a year and a half without having to find any other donors. And it was like within 1 week. It
Wow.
was the most bizarre thing. And that never normally happens, but it just, that was a miracle. I was like, yeah, God definitely is wanting this to happen. And so I moved, I think it was October 10th of 2019. And yeah.
That's incredible. Where what God wills, He'll open the doors.
Mhm.
Your life is a testimony to that. Now, okay, you go and you are a full-time missionary in Guatemala. You get there, boots on the ground. Oh, what happens at that point? What is the mission? What is the goal? What does life look like? It's kind of an open-ended question.
Mhm.
Take that where you would like to take that.
It's I'd say it's very individual because most missionaries have like a similar story of how they got to the place they're at, but the story of what they've done and what's happened within the first like 5 years is always about it's similar, but it's always different in what they did. So my first 3 years, I actually served as the administrator at the Guatemalan Baptist Seminary. The organization I worked with, they wanted to help out other parts of like the Guatemalan Baptist Association in Guatemala. And so I did a mixture of that job, coordinating mission teams to go to different places in Guatemala, and then a lot of construction projects in Guatemala and at the seminary itself. Um, so that was it was very different because like a lot of missionaries go and they set up their own kind of thing and it's kind of like okay we've got our own system or they're working with an organization doing like more evangelizing in teams only. Mine was like a almost like a day-to-day ministry job with doing missions every other week or so. Um, but yeah, and so I've met other missionaries here that have said that everyone like their first year or so is very different, and then it's like similar things happen, and then they get to the point where they're doing a lot of stuff on their own a lot of times. Um,
So there are some variations. Obviously, it looks different
mhm,
for people. So you're involved in multiple, you wear different hats from what I'm.
mhm,
Tell us again, in the South, I live in Alabama, and
mhm.
I know there are others out there that are within the region. What does Christianity look like in Guatemala? Churches, denominations, Roman Catholicism, Protestantism, being Baptist, or so on and so forth, all these different factors that might come into play. What does the church look like, so to speak, in
Mhm. So a lot of people, there is a lot of Catholicism. Baptists are growing, Pentecostals growing. Majority is Catholic. Um, the big thing is that they all cannot stand each other. um, Baptists, yes, Baptists and Pentecostals don't normally mix. They like to argue on different things in the Bible. And then, like a lot of Catholicism, they don't like anyone else other than Catholics when it comes to religion. And so there's a lot of kind of tension with that. I've been on several mission trips where some of the local people during evangelism would want to just argue with someone that said, I'm Catholic. But a lot of time, 9 times out of 10, I'm Catholic means, well, I don't actually do anything with the Catholic Church. My mom and dad were Catholic, grandparents were Catholic, so I'm a Catholic.
uh,
Um, a lot of stuff like that.
so different denominational groups and branches of Christianity are there, but there's not a lot of teamwork happening. There's not a lot of
No, there's a lack of teamwork even within churches themselves. Um, a lot of churches you see, it's odd. In a lot of Baptist churches, you see that there are like the pastor does 99% of the work. He might have some deacons, he may not. I've known several pastors in the Guatemalan Baptist churches that they are doing everything. And they have some help from some people, but it's a real struggle. A lot of evangelical churches have gotten larger ones, at least. They have a little bit more people, a lot like youth ministers and um, different leaders in the church. But most Baptist churches, it's a struggle for the pastors. They're pretty much doing 99% of the work.
okay. So sometimes I know churches here as well will struggle with volunteers and filling different roles. It sounds like that's an issue where you are, but on steroids, like it is a really strong or major. Um, so we'll continue on, and I'll have some more questions about like life on the ground where you are. But you mentioned you know girlfriend, wife. Tell us a little bit more about how you met her and how that grew into a marriage.
Okay. I met her, it was, I believe, the second time I went to Guatemala. Um, and she was an interpreter for one of the teams, or yeah, interpreter for one of the teams. And she happened to be in my group. And so we were just serving together, got to know each other. And then I remember that week, I was like, so, if I were to come to Guatemala and ask you out on a date, would you go with me? And she was like, no. I was like, oh. And she said, I'm just kidding. Yes, I would. I was like, oh, great. Well, that works out. And so we just kept FaceTiming once I got back to the US and just talking. And then I went to go meet her family that December to just meet with them and tell them what my intentions were and everything. And then she came and visited my family. And then we just kept seeing each other for, I think it was 3 or 4 years, long distance. And it was tough, but it was definitely worth it. And so once I finally moved here, we still dated for, I believe it was 4 more years. And then finally asked her to marry me. And there's that story. But yeah, it was a long, long time of long distance. That was rough, but it was completely worth it.
Wonderful. Glad to hear that story, and God bless the two of you. Now, okay, back to, I guess, Guatemala as a country, as a nation. Tell us a little bit about the industry there, the economy. Does Guatemala make or grow or produce, or what are some of the major job fields
Hmm.
tree that maybe the people you serve might be a part of?
Okay. The majority of Guatemala, they make a lot of money off of farming, construction. Their main thing that everyone knows about is coffee. They have different coffees in different regions, and that's what they're most known for. A lot of they also have a large like banana industry as well. Um, but their biggest thing is coffee. We found out, if I'm not mistaken, and I don't want Starbucks to sue me over this, but if I'm not mistaken, Guatemala sends coffee to Starbucks, and then Starbucks will send their coffee back to Guatemala to the Starbucks in Guatemala sometimes.
Really?
But mhm,
Great. Okay, so some of the exports there and some of the industry there. Now, just so that we have an idea, I know US people in the US have certain thoughts or certain expectations when it comes to traveling different parts of the world. When it comes to like the socioeconomic status of the people that you're around, rich, poor, middle class, material wealth or lack of, what
mhm.
would you say when it comes to Guatemala, or at least the area that you live in?
Okay. Guatemala is most of the money is in the city, and in specific points. So I've had one of the craziest things I had with the mission team was you drive maybe 20, 30 minutes and you see a place where people don't have homes. The ones that do have homes is just old rusty sheets of tin, just kind of piled up. And then you can drive back 30 minutes and see a shopping mall that might be one of the best ones you'll ever see in your life. Um, it's very odd how it works that way, but the city, there are specific spots where the wealth is all the way up, and then the majority of Guatemala is all the way back down. Most of it, if you go out into more rural areas, a lot of the families don't have that much. They're living on a dirt floor, like I said, and just some tin roofs and stuff like that. Some people may not have a home and they're just sharing it with another family. I've seen that happen a lot of times where they didn't have the money to afford land or a house. Um, a lot of people, they can't afford land in certain regions because someone would move to the US, make money, buy land in Guatemala, and then try to charge much higher than the average rate. Um, so I've known met several families where they just could not afford the land, and um, you would find out no wonder why they couldn't afford the land when you're buying this small little patch of grass that's, you know, like $500,000. Is just wild. And so you see a lot of poverty more outside of the city, and there's a lot of poverty inside the city too, but it's a lot easier. Where we're at, it's kind of it's not the super wealthy area, it's not the super poor area, it's kind of the middle ground. Um, and so it's the further normally you get from the city, the more the poorer it gets, in all honesty.
I think that that makes a lot of sense. And all right, going, let's zoom in just a little bit with ministry. In a given week, what does your schedule look like? Activities, ministries that you're a part of? Walk us through some of what you do in a random week.
Okay. Well, that opens a bigger can of worms than you might imagine.
I'm
Um,
maybe not, but I think I'm ready. Go for it.
so we actually, for a long time, I was just isolated. We were serving with the ministry, and everything was going great. And then things started getting kind of sour. And so God called us away. And I felt God was calling me to start a ministry that would do construction for families in need. And for some time, I was getting everything ready to do this. I had, I had the plans, I had everything ready for it, the name of the ministry. I did not have the money. And so I started reaching out to, and I remember it was, I believe it exactly 485 people that I direct messages and was just trying to get in contact with and saying, hey, I'm starting this ministry. I really need help. I have support for myself, but I can't do anything other than live right now. And so ended up, I actually lost the amount of support after that. I had one donor jump out and then a new one jump in at the same time, but the newer donor was donating less. And it just broke me. And so ended up we we financially we couldn't do anything. I ended up selling my truck. Couldn't go anywhere. Money was beyond tight. Um, it was a very, very depressing time. I remember at one point before selling the truck, I had been uh, I went to take my truck to get fixed. On the way, the part that connects to the drive shaft broke, and I was just like, "Okay, God, I mean, why are you doing this to me?" Um, and then there was a guy on the side of the road who was collecting bottles because he had no home and he had nothing. And I went and shared the gospel with him, and he accepted Christ as a savior. And I remember thinking, I was like, okay, if I had a successful ministry at this point, I wouldn't have been able to share the gospel with him. Later, got that part on the truck fixed, and then something else went wrong with it. I go in the Uber back to the mechanic, and I pray the same thing. I'm just like, okay, God, everything just keeps on failing. Why is this going on? I share the gospel with the Uber driver, and he accepts Christ as his Savior that day as well. I remember walking back up to my apartment, and it had a long driveway, and I just was boohooing and crying. And so, um, but then it was for a long time, I was just like, okay, God, I literally cannot do it. I don't have the money to go do anything. And I just spent time praying and reading the Bible. I remember there were days I was depressed, but I was reading the Bible and praying every day. Um, Things had gotten really hard. I tried to apply to another ministry and found out the previous ministry had said some things that were not true about me. One of the people there did not like me, and so that person decided to spread some false stuff about me. And so ended up not working with other ministries. And then I remember just praying, and I was like, okay, God, what's going to happen now? This is last November. Last November, within 1 week, our landlord had to sell our apartment. My my largest supporter texted me on the day that we had to move that he could no longer support us just because of life and things going on with him. The next day after moving, we nearly lost the car because the police pulled us over and said, your license plate is damaged. We're going to have to take the car. And that day was a very humbling experience when I literally cried. I was just like, please don't take our car. Everything's terrible right now. And that whole time also were so many things that I've told several people I could write a book about. Last year was the most painful, probably time in my life. My mom was having surgery. My grandmother was having surgery. My wife's mom was having surgery. Everything just happened within 2 months. And it was just so, so difficult every time. And so I remember one day I'm just sitting and stressed out, sitting right here. And my wife tells me, and she says, why are you worried? I was like, if we why am I worried? If we don't get the support we need, we can't do anything to begin with. If we don't get the support this month, we lose everything. And she just said, well, God's taking care of us the whole time. And I remember I was like, I just prayed and I was like, okay, God, show me what you want us to do. And so heard a sermon where a pastor had preached. He said, if God has called you to do something, he's not going to provide for your dream, but he is going to provide for what he's called you to do when he needs you to do it. And I remember I was like, okay, I'm going to post something on Facebook about what God's called me to do. And I said, I want to raise enough support to build 20 homes and share the gospel with 20 different families. And like the next day, someone messaged me and said, hey, I can't, you know, I don't really want to support for the homes yet, but I'd like to just support you. And so most of the time when someone is ever supported, you're thinking $10 to $50 range, not that much. I didn't think that much about it. And then the next day I saw the email and it was the exact amount that our largest supporter had been sending us. And I just fell to my knees crying. And so I was just like, okay, God, I know you want us here. I need to be able to do something now because we've just been stuck. The next month, or it might have been 2 weeks after that, that same person called and said, hey, I feel like God's leading me and my family to help you start this ministry. And so we're going to go ahead and pay to do 2 homes and then try to get more people involved. And I started crying again immediately. And so, normal day to day for me has not been a normal day to day for most people because for about probably a year and a half, there was not much but just depression and reading the Bible. Um, it got really hard, and I say that with that's a small phrase for an entire book that could be written on everything difficult that's happened in 2 years.
Mm.
But God has allowed this ministry to finally start. And I remember 2 years ago, I would have not had the same reaction I have now. 2 years ago, I was angry and like, why, God, did you not go ahead and give me teams yet? This time it was, God, thank you for allowing me to have one team so far. Uh, I was just bitter. I was angry. And God had to do some changing in me during that time. Um, and now He's finally allowed this ministry to start. And so now day to day is a lot different. Now day to day is checking to see, what other houses we can do. Like recently, we had a team come in, like me and you were talking about earlier. They did 2 concrete floors, and already going to plan on doing 2 concrete floors myself with some local people for some more houses. And so trying to get that set up with the local pastor in the area. But yeah, it's a lot different now. Um, but
Wow.
yeah.
I really appreciate you sharing. So before you could talk a little bit about some of the construction projects you're doing now, you need to talk about how you got to that point. So
Yeah.
thank you for sharing. And you mentioned teams. Let's talk a little bit more about that.
Mhm.
Say you need teams. Share more about what you mean.
So a team, what I mean by that is it can be a church group from the U.S., a group of guys that are saved and feel called to share the gospel in Guatemala and serve. Um, the recent team I had were some guys that one was from another church and the rest of them were with the same church. And they came and they did some work for a few days, doing some concrete floors. Zeke, our friend, had actually preached that Sunday, and I got to interpret the message for him that day. Um, it's it's kind of it's a short term mission team, is what it is, and it's really helpful. It's kind of like an energy drink to the ministry, the local ministry, to kind of boost things. And so we did a lot of things. We did the 2 floors. We also did some work at the local church. They had a lot of things that they needed repaired and fixed. And then we did some house visits, praying for some families that they've been suffering either family issues or health issues or both. And so it's a very fun week and a very, very busy week, and a week where there's a lot of spiritual growth, not just only in the area, but also in the team itself. So that's basically a team.
Okay. I like it. Now, as let's say church groups watch this, uh, age age ranges or a gender, are you looking for mostly men or can it be women? What about teens? What about those who might be older? Any specifics there or not really?
Not really. I'm fine with with anyone. Just come on. If you want to come to Guatemala, even if it's just one person or if it's 100, like just go ahead and come to Guatemala because there's plenty to do.
I love it. Okay, so just come on, and then you'll have you'll set up projects and things
Mhm.
like that. Now let's go to in the church direction.
Mhm.
Does a church gathering look like? I assume on Sundays or maybe Sunday mornings, worship, Bible studies, teaching, all the rest of it, discipleship. Talk
Mhm.
to us about what does the local church look like for you in your area?
So the local church we're serving with, they do a long service. It's a pretty long service. That when the team came, I went ahead and I warned them. I was like, guys, this is either going to be a short one or this is going to be a really long service. I don't know. But most time is they do Sunday school in the morning, and then they do regular church service, and then they actually do kind of like a little feeding thing after service,
Okay.
um, and that just kind of reaches out more people in the area.
Gotcha. Okay. Is Sunday the main day for the local church to gather, or does something happen maybe during the week or anything else?
Most churches mainly do, it's only on Sunday, most churches. There are a few churches, depending on where and if it's Baptist, evangelical, or something like that, they might do something during the week, like small groups and stuff like that. But most churches, it is just a Sunday only thing. I know that the local church that I'm working with, their pastor, he does a lot of house visits throughout the week in the afternoons. And so us being able to go with him that one day with the recent team, he really enjoyed that, just because it wasn't just him alone. So,
So maybe if a team comes and joins you, they can, as you're saying, they can jump into those types of opportunities.
oh, absolutely.
Great. And I think it's very needed. Good training for elders and deacons and things
Hmm.
of that nature. Okay. Um, when it comes to ministry, when it comes to the gathering of the local church, we go to Paul, and Paul talks about the body of Christ and how there are different gifts, talents, abilities. They all work together. We need each other as the body. Uh, what does your local church need when it comes to giftings or talents? Or, hey, a person in this role would be helpful, or a person with this ministry would be helpful. What are some of the needs maybe for your local church?
The local church, it's a strange thing specific in that region. There's a lot of fatherless families, or fathers that just don't participate in anything. Most of that church is made up of women and children. And then maybe ten men. Out of those 10 men, some of them do worship, some of them are technically deacons. But I would say the biggest need is if we had maybe like some sort of men's ministry that could reach out to men specifically. Um,
Why do you think that is? Why do you think the men are absent or just otherwise not involved?
I had talked with the local pastor, his name's Pastor Howell, and he said he's never seen anything like this. He's been all over Guatemala, and he actually came from a different place and moved there. Um, and he had said, John, I've never seen this many people that have fatherless homes. Um, it's not a normal. It's very specific to that region for whatever reason. When we did house visits, almost every most of the homes we went to, either the father wasn't present or had left the family or just didn't have a relationship with Christ. It was just the wife that did. And so I really don't know because it's very odd. It's only in that one specific area. I do know a lot of them travel all the way to the city to work. And so there might be a lack of where they're not spending a lot of time with their family to begin with. Because a lot of people, they might live somewhere else, but they travel all the way to Guatemala City to work. And in that area, depending on traffic, you might be 30 minutes to 3 hours away from the city, depending on traffic. And so that might be one reason is they get so into their work that they just don't spend time with family as much.
Okay, yeah, if you have to travel a while. I might not be there for your family as much. Okay, so that's one possible explanation. All right, I appreciate you sharing about the life of the local church and your ministry now. So I guess when it comes to what we can do, think about people here, churches here. How can we help? You mentioned teams. If someone wants to join a team or form a team, what can they do? And then we'll talk about donations in just a moment. But
Hmm.
let's focus on teams. Some
Okay.
I want to be a part of a team or I want to form a team.
Hmm.
What happens at that point?
So if they come and ask me and say, "Hey, I want to do a team," the next thing is to figure out, okay, when could you come? If they say next month, that's going to be a little difficult because just getting everything planned and getting like the construction materials ready, or you know, one thing I decided was like if we have a team that doesn't want to do construction, something else, we can do something else. We could do house visits only. We could do evangelism. We could do a medical clinic even. Um, there's no specific thing that I couldn't get together. Um, Being able to observe with so many different teams doing different things with other ministries was helpful in saying, okay, now I know what we need to do in order to make it happen. If there's a team that says, hey, I'd like to do dentistry, or I'd like to do um, you know some sort of conference or something like that. So the first thing would be they would say, "Hey, I want to come to a team." I'd say, "Okay, I'm going to make a budget of how much it would cost to come on the trip. On average, it's $100 per person per day, not including the airfare, um, and then start rolling from there. And we'll plan out the days when their team would want to come, and then I'll go ahead and start getting everything ready for work and stuff like that. Get the schedule worked out with the local church. And then once they get here, I'll go pick them up with a transportation service. And then we'll go to the hotel and get the week started. But yeah,
So you're willing to be flexible and adaptable depending on just schedules and all that.
yes.
They'll just go to you and you'll help to plan. Okay. Love to hear that. Now, financially, how can people give? And when they give, what will the money go towards?
Okay. So right now, my support is channeled through Modern Day Missions. They are a fund sending service in the United States that they send different missionaries their funds every month. And so right now, I'm already supported to survive and make it every day. All the funds extra would help me to be able to do more, be able to do more homes, be able to do house visits. One thing that's a big need of ours is another vehicle because right now we just have a small little Mazda 2, and I'm only able to use it Mondays and Fridays.
That a truck would be helpful.
Oh, it would be very helpful. But yeah,
Sorry to put you on the spot. So let's take a truck for instance. Um, how much would a truck cost, new or used? Or I assume obviously you would want it to be in good condition. So what would that run you?
so I had a 2000, I think it was a 2009 Toyota Tacoma a couple of years ago. That was roughly, I want to say maybe $13,000 for a used one. Um, it's a You can get a little bit cheaper on used cars here because a lot of the used cars are sent from the U.S. that were in wrecks, that were totaled. That the labor here is much cheaper. So
Okay, so 13,000 could be you could kind of work with that type of.
yeah, absolutely.
All right. Thanks for sharing. All right. And so when I go to, for those of you watching or listening to this episode, when I go to publish it, I'm going to have that information there. I'll have your Facebook page. I assume that's a good way of following you is
Oh
Facebook.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Would be Facebook.
Facebook page and then that donation link, y'all. Please consider giving, supporting John And one of the things that he's able to do, if he's able to meet physical needs, it opens up gospel conversation.
Absolutely.
You've already heard him. Just even when he's at his lowest, he's sharing the gospel. People are coming to Christ. And I think from a missions perspective, we're all about it. So I'll have that information there. I am an apologist for the ARC Apologetics Resource Center, so I have to ask this. It's kind of putting you on the spot, but if people say no as you share the gospel, no, I don't want to believe, I don't want to follow Christ, I'm not interested in the gospel, over in Guatemala, uh, what are some of the major reasons why you would say people don't want to believe in Jesus?
Really, the issue I've had more of is someone that will say they do, but they don't have a relationship. It's just they know about Jesus, or they at least they think they do. Um, I've met one person that I shared the gospel with, and I just told her, I said, "So you know you need Jesus Christ?" And she said, "Yes." "So would you like a relationship with him?" "Not today." I was like, "Why is that? If you know?" And she said, "Well, I know, but I I just don't want to right now." And she started to almost cry. I was just like, "Well, the time is like now. You don't. Why would you want to waste time?" And she just said, "Because I don't want to. I don't want to change right now." And so that was just one person I've spoken with that was like that. You come across a few people that are kind of they believe any religion is okay. They'll say some of them have said they're Catholic, but they'll be fine with anything. Um, but most people I've met, it's not so much that they'll say they believe in Jesus Christ, but you could ask them anything related to him in Scripture, and they have no clue. Where was he born? I don't know. Did he die on a cross? I don't know. Did he rise in 3 days? I don't know. So most things that I've had have just been people that they say, "Yeah, I believe him. My mom and dad did." But it's not so much I don't want them. But there have been a few times where someone was struggling with alcoholism, and it's like they just don't want to give that away. Um, because alcoholism is actually the main issue in Guatemala.
Okay. And I'll get to that in just a moment. So it sounds like, from an apologetic standpoint, you face a lot of the things that we face here in the South.
Hmm.
Oh, maybe I grew up in church. Sure, my parents, they believe and they practice, and I kind of did for a little bit, so I'm saved. Or, yeah, I know Jesus. I don't know anything about him, but I kind of know the name, so I'm saved. So it sounds like there's some overlap between the South and Christian, and then also in Guatemala too. Okay. So we'll move to alcohol for this next question. Um, what does it look like, I guess, to serve people with, you said this is a primary struggle.
Hmm.
How does the local church go about trying to serve people who struggle with this?
I've met some pastors that they just go straight head on and just will tell the person, "You're ruining your life and struggling with alcoholism, and you hurt everyone around you." And it's just a straight up telling them point blank. Um, some pastors, I've not really heard them speak much about it, but most Guatemalan Baptist churches are, yeah, we're 100% against alcohol. Something funny was normally a lot of churches don't drink wine on communion, but the funniest thing the last Sunday that we actually had grape soda for the communion. It wasn't even the grape juice, but that was pretty funny.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so some people they don't talk about it, other people
Hmm.
are head on speaking out against it. Okay, you probably will have the wide spectrum of responses there. But John, I really appreciate your time. I know in any particular direction we could talk for a lot longer, but I wanted to give, if people are watching or listening to this, just a general overview of what you do and who you are. And I appreciate you sharing your story. I appreciate your time.
I appreciate it too. I've had a great time getting to talk with you, getting to know you, and it's been a blessing to me.
Wonderful. And so our mutual friend is Zeke, so I'm glad you got to meet him.
Mhm.
Great guy. And I'm glad that y'all had a team that was able to come visit. But
Mhm.
right, John, thank you. And for those of you watching or listening, thank you for tuning in. My name is Nate Williams, the director of the Apologetics Resource Center. Keep on coming by. It will have more episodes and conversations for you. But until next time, God bless and take care.